So hi, my name's Joe Brewer and I'm a change strategist. So today I want to tell you about some really important work that's being done to update our economic theories by informing them with deeper insights into biological evolution. And the book that I want to review today is this one right here, The Darwin Economy, Liberty, Competition, and the Common Good by Robert Frank. And what the Darwin economy does, which is useful for all of us trying to create social change, is it looks backward in time at how a set of key ideas arose at a particular time in history and came to shape the future. So in particular, Robert Frank takes the position that right now, if you asked 100 economists, 99 of them would tell you the most important historical figure to shape the thinking of economics is Adam Smith, the author of The Wealth of Nations. But that in 100 years from now, if you were to ask 100 economists, that 99 of them would say it wasn't Adam Smith who was the most important thinker, it was Charles Darwin. And that is because Charles Darwin, who we know gave us the theory of natural selection, which helped explain how biological evolution could create new species over time. And one of the things that's a really important difference between Adam Smith and Charles Darwin is Adam Smith, at the time was really surprised to discover that individual people acting in their own self-interest could actually collectively lead outcomes that were good for the entire society. So he called this the invisible hand of the market. And later, other theorists who had a political agenda to advance early capitalism took Adam Smith's idea and changed it and said that the only and the best way to get to good societal outcomes was to promote selfish behavior or individual self-interest. And what this does is it confuses the interests of the individual and the interest of the group. Well, it turns out that Charles Darwin, from the very beginning of his work in theorizing about natural selection, already drew distinctions between what he called individual selection and group selection. That sometimes what is good for the individual is good for the group, but other times what's good for the individual is bad for the group. And so an example of this that Robert Frank talks about, which you can see here on the front cover, is bull elk. So bull elk, male elk, grow these long antlers, which you can see depicted here, that can be like 4 feet wide. Now, why did their antlers ever get that big? Turns out that there's this phenomenon in sexual selection and biology where some individuals will get benefits depending on where they are relative to others, their relative status or their relative position. And so with the bull elk, the largest and strongest elk is the one that defeats the other smaller, less strong male elk. And then they get exclusive sexual or reproductive access to all of the females in the herd. So it's a winner-take-all kind of situation where the largest bull elk wins, all of the other bull elk lose. And over time, this creates a kind of selection pressure for larger and larger antlers, until eventually the antlers get so big it's actually bad for the elk population because the bull elk can't navigate in the forest well enough. So in the same way, humans have this individual selection around relative status. So if one person makes $1 million and another person makes $5 million, the person making $1 million will try to vie their way up the economic ladder to compete with the person who makes $5 million. And so if there's a type of economic stratification, as we have today in our world that is very much unequal in terms of the distribution of wealth, that we end up with luxurious purchases, runaway conspicuous consumption, which leads to massive waste at the societal scale, very inefficient market dynamics, and ultimately fragile and potentially threatened entire societies. Like we look at the world today with our global economy, massive wealth inequality, and all of the ecological harm that's happening, that is driven largely by a runaway consumer behavior kind of dynamic, which is explained by this mismatch between individual selection and group selection in Darwin's theory. So all of this is to say that what Robert Frank is doing in this book, The Darwin Economy, is making the claim that if we think about economic behavior using evolutionary principles, that we actually get better understandings of how economies work, than what are put forth by the traditional economic theories, but also they give us insights into specifically what the mechanisms are that lead to the collective outcomes that we see, and how we could design social policies that build upon and use our social behavior and its evolutionary mechanisms to help societies become more attuned to what they need to be. So if we have a society like today in the world where we have carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere, largely from the burning of fossil fuels, which is creating planetary climate disruption, that the need for us to reduce that pollution through appropriate mechanisms of creating incentive structures that help people compete and cooperate with each other to achieve beneficial outcomes for individuals and society. Well, to get that kind of an outcome, we really need clarity and understanding what are the individual selection pressures and what are the group selection pressures and how are they related to each other. And all of this leads to some work by an evolutionary theorist that I've had the pleasure of starting to work with, David Sloan Wilson, who talks about multi-level selection, which is that sometimes you have individual and group selection happening at the same time, and they can have different strengths, different dominance or influence depending on the context. So this kind of approach to looking at economics shows great promise for the future. And for all of us who want to create social policies that lead to better societies, it's absolutely essential for us to study this field of behavioral economics and evolutionary economics. And this is a really great starting point if you're not familiar with that field yet. So I would recommend for any culture designer who wants to create societal outcomes that build on how human social behavior actually works from a scientific perspective, that you'll want to look at it through an evolutionary lens, and that this book, The Darwin Economy, is a really great starting point. So there you go. Go and get your copy today and learn more about how to design better social outcomes through economics. Enjoy.